Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, so he became very angry and upset. He made fun of the Jews. He spoke to his friends and the army of Samaria, and he said, "What are those Jews trying to do? Can they make their wall like new again? Will they offer sacrifices? Can they finish everything in a single day? The stones from their city wall and buildings are piled up like trash, and everything has been badly burnt. Can they use those stones to rebuild everything again?" And Tobiah from Ammon was at Sanballat's side. They're putting up a stone wall. But suppose a fox climbs on top of it. Even that will break it down. And so I prayed to God, and I said, "Oh God, listen to our prayer." Some people hate us. They're saying bad things about us. So let others say bad things about them. Let them be carried off like stolen goods. Let them be taken to another country as prisoners. Don't hide your eyes from their guilt. Don't forgive their sins. They have said bad things about the builders. And so we rebuilt the wall. We repaired it until it was half as high as we wanted it. And the people started to work with all their hearts. But Sanballat and Tobiah heard that Jerusalem's walls continued to be repaired, and the Arabs and the Ammonites and all the people of Ashdod heard about it too. They heard that the gaps in the wall were being filled in, and they were very angry. And all of them made evil plans to come and to fight against Jerusalem. They wanted to stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God. We put guards on duty day and night to watch out for danger. And during that time, the people of Judah spoke up. They said, "Our workers are getting weaker and weaker all the time. Broken stones are piled up everywhere. They're in our ways. so we can't rebuild the wall. And our enemy said, we will be right there among them. We'll kill them. We'll put an end to their work. And we'll do it before they even know it or see us. And then the Jews who lived near our enemies came to us, and they told us 10 times, no matter where you are, they'll attack us. So I stationed some people behind the lowest parts of the wall. That's where our enemies could easily attack us. I stationed the people family by family. And they had their swords, spears and bows with them. I looked things over. Then I stood up and I spoke to the nobles, the officials and the rest of the people. And I said, don't be afraid of our enemies. Remember the Lord. He is great and powerful. So fight for your families. Fight for your sons and your daughters. Fight for your wives and your homes. And our enemies heard that we knew what they were trying to do. They heard that God had blocked their evil plans. So all of us returned to the wall. Each of us did our own work. So from that day on, half of the men did the work, and the other half were given spears and shields, bows and armour, and the officers stationed themselves behind all the people of Judah. The people continued to build the wall. The people who carried supplies did the work with one hand, but they had a weapon in their other hand. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the man who blew the trumpet stayed with me. And then I spoke to the nobles, the officials and all the rest of the people, and I said, this is a big job. It covers a lot of territory. We're separated too far from one another along the wall. So when you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us at that location, and our God will fight for us. And so we continued the work. Half of the men held spears, and we worked from the first light of sunrise until the stars came out at night. And at that time I also spoke to the people. I told them, every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night. Then they can guard us at night. And they can work during the day. And my relatives and I didn't take off our clothes. My men and my guards didn't take off theirs either. Each man kept their weapons with them, even when they went to get water.
Well, the birds still sing. It's like they don't know. And it seems kind of insensitive, but it gives me hope. And the flowers bloom, and the sun still shines. And it seems somehow significant in these crazy times. So I try not to worry, and I try hard to pray. And I'm thankful that I'm not alone in these lockdown days. And I try to be grateful, and I'm finding my way, and I'm trusting that you'll walk with me through these lockdown days. Well, the seasons change, see it in the sky, and I know that I am changing too as the days go by. There are things I miss, there are things I don't. Some things we will return to, and some things we won't. So I try not to worry, and I try hard to pray. And I'm thankful that I'm not alone in these lockdown days. And I try to be grateful, and I'm finding my way, and I'm trusting that you'll walk with me through these lockdown days. So I try not to worry, and I try hard to pray, and I'm thankful that I'm not alone in these lockdown days, and I try to be grateful, and I'm finding my way, and I'm trusting that you'll walk with me through these lockdown days. Well, the birds still sing. I wonder if they know.
If you want to follow Jesus Christ, and especially if you want to lead others to follow him, sooner or later you'll hit opposition and criticism. Jesus told us we should expect opposition, persecution and trials. He told us that if we wanted to follow him, we need to take up our cross. I think that phrase, take up, is challenging. Taking up your cross is not simply and passively accepting it. And even less is it moaning or complaining about it. It's a challenge to sacrificial living and facing struggles and battles face on with courage and persistence. But troubles and opposition didn't start with those who became Jesus' disciples. It's been part of the experience of God's people since the very beginning. And in our reading today, Nehemiah and the Jews who were rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem had their fair share. And by the way, Nehemiah wasn't a priest. He's not listed as a prophet. I suppose he was what we'd call today a civil servant, a layperson. But he was God's leader for the hour. And he's a massive example to us all, whether we are in ordained leadership or not. So let's have a look at what kind of opposition Nehemiah and those with him faced. First of all, he faced criticism and ridicule. You are feeble and weak. Your wall is so pathetic that even a fox jumping on it would make it fall down. Who do you think you are? Do you think you can build this wall in a day? You have received such criticism. Sometimes it can be people around us, but sometimes the enemy appears as a voice in our own head, like an echo of all the put downs we've ever received from parents and teachers, school friends, colleagues and even partners, as well as, of course, as bullies and enemies. If so, you'll know that the natural reaction is discouragement. It can make us ready to give up before we start. But let's note, Nehemiah first reacted with prayer. His prayer might seem a bit over the top. He prayed all sorts of horrible things would happen to his enemies, Sanballat and Tobiah. But it's worth noting that God had in mind to answer Nehemiah's prayer in a very different way. And actually none of those horrible things happened. And the descendants of Nehemiah's opponents, the Samaritans, remained in the land and do so to this day. And many were converted to Christ by the ministry of Philip and later the other apostles, as recounted in Acts chapter 8. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of the story. Nehemiah might, like many of God's saints, have got a little bit of what he prayed wrong. But he realised it was God he needed to turn to. And God answered him anyway. But much of that answer was through the work of his own hands. And so we built the wall. It was this action that God was to use to answer Nehemiah's prayer. He and the people just got on with it. They got on with building. They linked up all the separate bits of wall and got it more or less to halfway the height that they needed. And sometimes when people grind us down, we just have to get on with it. And what an encouragement it must have been to reach the halfway point for Nehemiah and his team. But it wasn't over yet. Nehemiah had two more big hassles to deal with. First, the opposition intensified. They got word that what had been ridicule and criticism was turning into a threat, a violent attack. And at the same time, and possibly linked to the threats, the people of Judah, the strongest and the most influential of the Jewish tribes, started to lose heart. They were overwhelmed by the work. And they complained that not only were they struggling with a big job, but all the rubble was getting in their way. And they had a point. The mess of a broken down and abandoned city would have taken a lot of time to clear up. They would have needed to clear it up to build the temporary structures to enable the higher part of the wall, like wooden scaffolds and ramps strong enough for them to haul heavy stones and rocks up. Like us in the church today, sorting out the resultant mess from past problems and failures can consume massive amounts of energy as we pursue new projects. And it can be exhausting and debilitating. But for Nehemiah and his friends, if that wasn't enough, they received intelligence about 10 times of coming attacks from the Jews who lived near to those who were plotting against the city. So, Nehemiah got organised. He organised the people into guard groups to watch the lower points of the wall, and he encouraged the defenders to remember they had a great and awesome God. And boy, do we need that message today. Whatever the problem and however big it seems, we have a great and awesome God who's even bigger than that problem. Remember the Lord. who is great and awesome. And the enemies got the message, and the immediate threat of attack receded. But Nehemiah shifted gear. From then on, half the men worked while the other half stood by armed. I guess that gave half of them a bit of a rest from the very heavy building, though they'd still have to keep watch. And even the workers had their weapons in one hand while they built with the other. So I suppose the building rate slowed down. And those who'd been nipping off home at night slept in Jerusalem so they could take their turn on the night watch. You know, sometimes as a church leader, I'm tempted to complain how much more we could get done if we didn't have to deal with various problems and opposition, or didn't have to deal with grumbling and complaints in the ranks. Sometimes we dream of quick results, but are forced to slow down and deal with the issues that present themselves. But we need to do so without losing sight of our goals. And there's sometimes a cost for that. For Nehemiah and his team, it meant they slept in their clothes. They stayed vigilant day and night. They couldn't even lay down their weapons to get a drink of water or relieve themselves. The apostles and their co-workers in the early church saw church growth. And in some places they saw very rapid growth. But they also saw persecution and opposition. They suffered internal division. They lived under constant threat. But like Nehemiah, they prayed and persevered and carried on. Will you?